Welcome back to another session of Vasant Vihar Litfest. I can tell you this is going to be an absolutely spectacular session, and we look forward to hearing from Padma Ji and Ambassador Haksar. Ambassador Haksar is well known for his collection of translations of Sanskrit classics into English, the manuscript archive of which may amount to 40,000 volumes. He is a career diplomat. He was also the Dean of the Indian Foreign Service Institute and the President of the UN Environment Programme's Governing Council. From Ambassador Haksar, a pleasure and welcome to Vasant Vihar Litfest. In conversation with Ambassador Haksar is Padma Chib. Padma Chib is one of the longest serving, respected and inspiring members of the managing committee of the Vasant Vihar Club and Society. She set up the Vasant Vihar Club's book club, where members got an opportunity to interact with authors. The Vasant Vihar Litfest is a brainchild of Padma Chib, which now is growing bigger. And this year, for the first time, it's virtual. So Padma Ji, we have a lot to thank you for.
Thank you, Sanjana.
The book we are discussing this afternoon is called The Shameless Heart. And Padma Ji is going to be in conversation with Ambassador Haksar, and he will tell us more about the translation and what this book is all about. So over to you, Padma Ji.
Okay, thank you, Sanjana. Well, Sheil, very nice to have you on our book fest. Of course, it is a virtual one. It is the first online literary festival that we are having. So very nice to have you here. My first question to you is, Sheil, that, I know most of our ambassadors upon retirement write books, but most of them are on their memoirs or on political issues. How is it that you sort of ventured to go into a field which is totally new, translation of Sanskrit literature into English? Must have been some motivation or something in your background which sort of propelled you to get into this field. Can you tell us something about this?
Well, this can become a very long biographical explanation, but I will keep it very brief. You see, I studied Sanskrit as a schoolboy long time ago. After school, I went to college and university in the foreign service, and my contact with Sanskrit gradually faded away into the background. After retirement, I think maybe something had been left inside me about it. I wanted to revive it. And I came to the conclusion that the best way for me to revive it would be by trying to translate something which I had studied as a schoolboy. So that is how it started. And so the first book on which I worked for translation was the Panchatantra, which I had studied as a boy 60, 70 years earlier. And then it was a matter of luck, or maybe this is how things are, but it was picked up by newspapers, it was published for a year. Statesman said that we'd like to carry one story every Sunday, that kind of thing. And then, this thing then grew into other things. Then I was approached by Penguin. And so then after that, it's just been going on. In the beginning,
Sheil, how much did you study in the school, Sanskrit? Because these days, in the early parts of the school, I think children learn only grammar and nothing else. But how much, did you study till high school or something, the Sanskrit literature, or what was it?
Well, I studied Sanskrit literature up to the senior Cambridge.
I see.
Those days, the system of education was quite different. It was as you studied English, and the course included doing plays and stories and so on. We went into the texts also. So I learned a little bit then, and then I found from experience now that efforts to translate are also a very good method of relearning something. So I found that the more I translated, the more I learned, then I could do more and more difficult things which I had never studied or heard of before. So this is how
So,
it started.
so tell us about your journey. I mean, you said you started with Panchtantra. Then how did you graduate into the novels and all? How did you go into that? And what period of translation have you done? Because this book says that it's 1,000 years old. So what is the span that you have traveled into? From what time to what time?
Well, you see, Padma, my translation activities now are almost 30 years old because my first Panchatantra, after it was in the newspapers and so on, got published in 1992. At that time, I was also spending time writing a column in the Times of India and in the Pioneer on foreign affairs and international situation and so on. But then, as this translation demands increased, that work tended to be eventually just abandoned. Because then I found, again by chance, I came into contact with Penguin, and then they started asking me to do things for them. And then I started translating things which they wanted me to do, because they had their own list of things they wanted. So that was how I began. And then gradually, in the course of translation, I've done now something like 20. My first incentive was by this means to bring before the public of today Sanskrit works that they do not know at all. Because, the public understanding of Sanskrit literature today is that it is mainly religious and philosophical. When people talk of Sanskrit, they talk, and literature, they talk of the Gita and the Vedas and the Upanishads and maybe the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and then it's full stop after that. Some people talk about Kalidas also, but Sanskrit literature is very vast. There's a lot of material in it. At one stage, it used to be well known in this country. Then gradually it tended to go into the background. So I started translating some of the texts which had become comparatively unknown. And as that process continued, I came eventually to a time when I started to translate books which had never been translated into English before. And that, of course, was very good. It gave me a great deal of pleasure to do such things because it gives you the feeling that you are producing something for the public to know now. And in between, I kept, it kept alternating with demands from publisher, from Penguin, because they said, please do such and such thing for us because they had heard about it. Maybe they were advised that they needed a translation for that in the Penguin Classic. So I did that also. So this is how it's been going on from one side to the other.
Well, tell us about this latest book of yours on poetry, The Shameless Heart by Amaru. I mean, I believe it's a fantastic poetry written many. So I think I would like to hear from you a little bit about this. And then I have some questions about it.
Well, I am very glad to be able to tell you something about Amaru. And during this program, also to let this be known to a wider audience who must be perhaps watching this program or hearing about it. You see, very little is known about Amaru himself. Apart from the known name, very little is known. But he is there in Sanskrit literature for almost now 1200 years. So he's been around for 1000 years more in the world of Sanskrit literature. And over this long period, over centuries after centuries, in Sanskrit literature, he has been written about, commented upon, and praised as a wonderful writer and a wonderful poet. And the very first critical comment about Amaru, which I saw, was by a very famous Sanskrit critic from Kashmir in 900 AD. And that man, his name was Ananda Vardhana, and he wrote that here is a poet who can say in one verse a whole poem. He's so brilliant. So this is how I got to know about him. Then I discovered also that he was a poet who had concentrated on writing love lyrics. So there is no philosophy, no religion, no economics, no talk of politics and so on. It is entirely love, 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 and love, which he expresses, though it's written so long ago, he writes it in a language which is very modern also, because people can follow it and relate to it even today. Because it's called love, for mutual love between two people, how they feel about it, how happy they are with it, how displeased they are with it, how angry they get, how delighted they get, the problems they have in making love, the problems and the joys which come out of being together. All these things are covered in verse after verse.
How many verses is it composed of, this book?
You see, there's also a scholarly dispute about how many, but the oldest text of Amaru, which we now have, was a text composed and put together by a prince called Arjun Varma Deva. And he was a descendant of the famous Raja Bhoj in central India. These are historical characters. He put together his text, which is called the Amaru Shatakam, 100 verses high. The date is even known now. It is something like 1216 or 1240. So it is now, you might say, it's 900 years old now. And that text after that had many commentaries written on it and many additions to it. And this process went on century after century till about the 19th century. After that, I think because the way under the British Empire, the cultural values changed and things changed, Amaru seemed to have gone into the background and got almost forgotten. So I said to myself that this is the time to bring it out again. And this is how I then decided to do it. And I took for myself, what I have translated is the verses which were put together by Arjun Varma Deva in the 13th century, and which all critics have recognized as the original works. But some have added other works.
I believe the Austrian Sanskritist described Amaru's poem as the main work of erotic lyricism in Sanskrit literature. And the British historian of Sanskrit, Keith, called his poetry a collection of pictures of love. What is your comment on this?
Well, both of them are correct. It is also a reflection of the fact that in today's world, Amaru poetry receives more attention among such circles outside than in India itself. Because there have been reviews and comments on Amaru's writings, even after the two which I quoted in my book. There was a famous writer who passed away only about 6 or 7 years ago, who wrote an entire chapter. His name was Warder, A.K. Warder, and he wrote a multi-volume history of Sanskrit literature, and he had a whole chapter about Amaru. So, and even now, even I think 5 or 6 years ago, someone from America has made a new translation. But here in this country, the last time anyone translated Amaru was more than 100 years ago. So I thought the time has come now that it should be done here. And this is the result, this book by Shameless Heart.
What about it also says, one of the comments says that the ancient lyrics give vivid glimpses of human love in quite a modern manner. It's the joy of love, desire and fulfillment, and it's also about unfulfilled love. And I mean, I read some of the verses that you have sent to me. I mean, it's amazing the way they are asking that girl, how do you feel about the people looking at her and things like that. They are asking her these things. So, I mean, tell us, quote some of the verses from there to give us how they are very modern. I found very modern, not just erotic, but modern also in certain ways. But just can you recite not the Sanskrit verse, the translated ones that you have?
I'll give you a translation right away. This is very brief. I don't want to, uh, you know, completely take up the program with this. Here is the poet addressing a young woman. And mind you, here he is writing this 1,000 years ago.
Yes.
This gives you an idea as to how then and now the feelings are the same. Your gaze, he says, your gaze is languid, soft with love. You shut your eyes repeatedly and open them for just a moment to stare or shyly dart a glance, full of some inner feeling. Say, young lady, who is he, that lucky man you're looking at? That's just a
But
verse.
what was her reply? Did she give a reply?
Now she gives no reply to that. That is gone. But I'll give you another verse now.
Yeah.
Which is the name of the title of the book is derived from this verse. Because each verse is complete in itself. Each verse is a complete story. Now this verse is a totally different situation of two people making love. And here is the girl speaking. She is speaking to her girlfriends. Somehow, in a play of pique, I told him to get out. And he, hard-hearted, just left the bed and walked away abruptly. But my shameless heart still yearns for that callous spoiler of our love. Oh, good friend, what shall I do? So this is a complete thing. So now you have verses like this just going
There's
on.
another verse in which she says that he is still in my heart. You have that verse there with you?
Yes,
She
I'll tell you.
talks, she says, don't talk. She's telling the audience not
Yeah.
to talk too harshly about him, because even though whatever he did, he is still in my heart. He may get angry about it.
Yes, I'll tell you that. This is I can tell you. Yeah, here it is. Again, her girlfriends are telling her, "You simple girl, do you intend to be so naive all the time? Compose yourself and mind your honor. Don't be artless with your lover." Thus advised by friends, the maid, with a timorous look replies, "Hush, softly, my lord may hear you, for he is here within my heart." So you see, you have this kind of verse going on, and then there is a
So we need to have one whole session where you just read out these beautiful verses and remind us of simple, of these notions of simple romance, which in these days one is completely bereft of.
quite. You see, now this is about women. Now I'll give you a verse about a male lover. He's addressing the woman. Beautiful, give up your pride. Look at me. I'm at your feet. You've never been so cross before. By her loved one thus addressed, she cast a glance from half-closed eyes, shed many tears, said not a word.
Beautiful.
So you
So
see,
she's what women are like even today. But anyway,
so you
so
see, and then
just, I mean, in a way to round up, tell
Yeah.
me, in all this large collection of yours, translations and all, what is, you say it's still very modern. Now, what is the takeaway? Something that you would say to your audiences, that it is still, things are still the same, or or some message that you got from these books that you
Well,
have done.
I'll give you a message from this very book, expression, though again said 1,000 years ago, expressing a thought, an intimate thought which is completely modern to this time. When to the bed my lover came, my skirt not opened by itself. I held the cord, but the dress slipped off with just a bit left on my hips. That is all I know, my friend. For when he took me in his arms, who was he and I myself, or what we both then did together, I can't at all remember. So you see, when you have these kind of verses, this is reflecting one aspect of life. But overall, what I discovered in the course of my own work while translating Sanskrit literature was that it has many aspects which in today's world, where we think about it only in terms of religion and philosophy, in terms of Shankaracharya and the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita and things like that, that there are aspects which deserve to be noted today. One aspect which I discovered and which is very little known outside is satirical writing in Sanskrit. And I discovered satirical satires, 3 ancient satires from ancient Kashmir. And they are satires about everyday life, about corruption in government, about hypocrisy in religion, about greed in trade and business, expressed in terms which seem quite real even to this day, but they were expressed such a long time, and they are written in very simple language. Now, these translations which I did, again, they had never been brought out to the general reader like this. So I was very
I think it would be, it would be a great opportunity, sir, for you to come and talk a bit more about this, because these are things which one doesn't really know anymore or hear about anymore. So it would be our pleasure to host you again at the club. Mrs. Chib is sitting right there, and I'm sure she would agree with me that it would be wonderful to listen to you when we have a bit more time also on our hand, because this needs to be a standalone session where we just hear what you have translated and make us aware of how emotions over the years have just remained the same. They haven't changed much.
Thank you very much, Sanjana. But there's just one other aspect which I'd like to mention, because it is very important in the times in which we are living and in the times when we have all these emotional and religious conflicts thought going on here. There are Sanskrit verses, Sanskrit scriptures, Sanskrit literature, which demonstrate a confluence of cultures.
Right.
Not only Sanskrit. I happen to have translated two of them into English, which no one has ever done so before. One of them was in Arabic sources. It is called Sulaiman Charitra. It is a description of the love story of David and Bathsheba in Sanskrit, again done about 600 or 700 years ago.
Right.
And it's a delightful book. And another one, which was taken from Persian, Farsi sources and done in Kashmir.
So it would be absolutely a pleasure to find out more about these books, because, as you say, these are things which, because you have translated, you know about it, whereas we don't know much about it. So maybe we get back, we'd love to host you at the club and listen to you at length again. I have the president of the club, Dr. Pushpendra Rai. He will just say a few words, and so over to you.
Ambassador Haksar, what an absolutely fascinating session, and what a unique talent you have, sir. Normally, after a full career in diplomacy, one would have thought that an ambassador would write about security or diplomacy or global politics, but writing poetry of this kind, translating from Sanskrit, an absolute pleasure listening to you, sir. And as Sanjana said, we would be happy to host you one of these days in the very near future to do one of what are called Zoom-in sessions, where you can sit at home and talk to our constituency over here. thank you very much, sir, for joining us over here today. And absolutely a unique experience for all of us in the Litfest. And Mrs. Chib, of course, as I always say, doyen of our literary community. All of us are here because of Mrs. Chib. She's the one, the real brain behind the Litfest. And all that we are doing over here is what was started by her. And had it not been for her guidance, we wouldn't have been doing these literary festivals. Ambassador, a small memento from our side. I'm just sort of showing it to you on the screen, but we will ensure that it reaches you at the earliest possible. We'll send it over to your place. But thank you very much again, Ambassador, and Mrs. Chib, as always. Pleasure to have both of you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Sanjana. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Padma. It's a delight to be with you. And thank you
with us.
And sir, we will be in touch. We will definitely have a session with you